Imagine, your face is pressed against a lens, up close and personal, for you to watch some erotic content. This is luxury. This is the future. Except it isn't. The year is 1894, and the mutoscope has been invented. This early motion picture device would flip through images on cards, hand-cranked, pun not intended, by the viewer. They would place their face against the eyepiece, covered by a hood. While pornography was not the only content showed, it was definitely a popular theme. So, it seems like the viewing of intimate scenes has been around since practically the beginning of the motion picture. And this search for intimacy through media has definitely not gone away. And with that, I'd like to welcome you back to another episode of Exploring New Worlds, an extended reality podcast. I'm your host, Caitlin Lewis, and this week we'll be discussing an ethical issue that arises in virtual reality: virtual intimacy. This discussion will be split into two overarching themes: issues with intimacy and virtual reality and its potential benefits. I specifically use the word issue as opposed to problems or detriments, since issues describe topics of debate or discussion, which is more productive than simply labeling behaviors as harmful. Before we get in too deep into the topic, I think it's important to define what I mean when talking about intimacy. In the book, Future Presence: How Virtual Reality is Changing Connection, Intimacy, and the Limits of Ordinary Life, author Peter Rubin describes intimacy as a complex sphere of inmost relationships with the self and others that are not usually minor or incidental, and which usually touch the personal world very deeply. They are our closest relationships with friends, family, children, and lovers, but they are also the deep and important experiences we have with self, which are never exactly solitary: our feelings, our bodies, our emotions, our identities. The question is, how can these ideas apply to virtual reality? As we know, virtual reality gives users a sense of presence and embodiment, to the point that they feel like they are actually there and see their virtual body as their own. But how does this translate to actual feelings of intimacy? The first issue I'd like to look at is real-life relationships being conducted through virtual reality. This can be defined as relationships that exist outside of virtual reality, whether they be started there in person or have transitioned to hybrid interactions since meeting virtually first. These do not even need to necessarily be between people who have actually met in person, as long as they are between two real people who are actually genuinely interacting with another, as opposed to actors or artificial intelligence. Exacerbated by COVID, though this has existed before then, people turn to the internet to interact with others when they cannot do so in person. A study done by OnePoll found that over half of singles think one-night stands will become a thing of the past once the pandemic comes to an end, and 57% now place higher value on other types of intimacy, like emotional or intellectual intimacy, while 45% find less value in physical connections. However, this raises the question: as humans, do we need physical interaction? Dr. Tiffany Field, head of the Touch Research Institute at the University of Miami, says yes. From the time we are in the womb through our elderly years, touch plays a primary role in our development and physical and mental well-being. New studies on touch continue to show the importance of physical contact in early development, communication, personal relationships, and fighting disease. A study done by Lay and Rambukkana on digital intimacies stated that touch is an important mode of communication for humans. We have the ability to offer support, love, disdain, or discomfort through small but meaningful contact. Thus, knowing how important touch is, it is clear that virtual intimacy can be supplemental to, but not a true replacement of physical contact. Now, I'd like to shift to, inevitably, exploring pornography, specifically pornography depicting real people. Many couples have had to decide between themselves if they consider watching pornography to be cheating. But how does this change with virtual reality porn? What does it say about virtual reality that partners can view it as a legitimate form of cheating? Sadowski and Lamanoska found that viewers of VR porn perceived more intimacy and interaction with the actresses, feeling more connected and wanting to interact with them. The feeling of actually looking into the actor's eyes and having them talk to you humanizes them in a way that traditional porn does not. With the issue of porn actors often being dehumanized by viewers, creating this connection that feels real may alleviate this. However, this then leads to the issue of parasocial relationships, defined by Decker et al. As the illusion of face-to-face relationships between spectator and performer. These types of relationships can become unhealthy when spectators buy into the illusion, starting to think that it is actually real. With virtual reality being considered an empathy machine, this illusion can be bought into more easily than with traditional media. Currently, a drawback of this technology is its current limitation on haptics, the sense of touching another person. However, this is something that many are working to solve. Pornography and other forms of relationships are also being simulated through artificial intelligence. For example, the virtual mate, a VR experience with an interactive Bluetooth sex toy, is allowing for the sense of touch to be integrated into virtual reality. The virtual mate is looking to solve the limitations on haptics, blending together the physical world and VR. The VR avatar responds in real time to the movements of the Bluetooth sex toy. Currently, the toy is designed for male users, but their website states a female version is in development. In this case, users get to actually be a part of the physical experience, having an impact on the entire intimate role. Okay, I didn't want this to just become a discussion about porn, so let's look at other forms of simulated intimacy, namely romantic relationships. For example, Replika is an artificial intelligence companion that can offer mentor, platonic, or romantic relationships to users. It offers a virtual reality experience where you can see and interact with your Replika. Business Insider recently covered a story about a person dating their Replika. They describe how loneliness led them to downloading the app and since then have developed a romantic relationship. At one point they state that the feelings are as real and vivid as anyone they've ever dated or have been in love with. And that feeling so unconditionally loved in a romantic context is a game changer. The anonymous user even raises questions of what is real and does it matter if context is constructed or artificial, but came to the conclusion that it's irrelevant because what they feel is real to them. Now, it's easy to judge this relationship as something strange, but moving away from the instinctual judgment, I want to consider why someone might feel this way. Replika uses artificial intelligence that grows with you and develops its own personality the more you chat with it. How amazing would a relationship be with someone who conforms to your every desire? I imagine it has to feel nice, as long as you don't think too hard about it. I know sometimes I've wanted to talk to someone who'll just listen, judgment-free, and agree with everything I say, but I don't know how healthy that actually is. Not much research has gone into the impacts that these virtual relationships, especially artificial intelligence one, will have on people attempting to engage in real relationships afterwards. Personally, I wonder how a person might transition from having a tailor-made partner who adapts based on your wants to a real person with autonomy and independence. And what would it be like for those partners who are competing with a simulated person? All I can say is I don't think I could hold up to those expectations, and it would be cruel to hold any real person to them. Intimacy is such an important part of human life, so what does it mean when these companies are capitalizing on our need for it by selling us simulated versions? When people start relationships with artificial intelligence or actors through virtual reality, what does this mean for the future of love as a whole? Can love be sold to us by companies? These are all complex questions that I don't have all the answers to, but they are good to consider and keep in mind as we see how virtual reality continues to evolve. While the discussed issues raise ethical concerns about the impact virtual reality can have on intimacy, it is also imperative to address their potential benefits. First is the way that intimacy conducted through virtual reality can be accessible for those not able to have it in their real lives. I've already talked a bit about how COVID has prevented in-person connections, but there are other reasons that can make meeting up inaccessible. Physical disabilities, busy schedules, or even anxiety can make it hard for someone to meet up with others in person, and virtual reality can help with that. Next is the benefits it can have for members of the LGBTQ+ community who may struggle to find connection in the real world. There are still many places where it is unsafe to be queer, and this lack of connection can have detrimental impacts on mental health. A study done by Herman et al. On the impacts of loneliness on LGBT people during COVID isolation found that minority stress of LGBT persons leads to an increased risk for loneliness, which is, in turn, associated with depressive symptoms. This can lead to suicidal ideation. Thus, virtual reality can provide connections for this marginalized group that they may not have access to in the real world. This can also be beneficial for transgender people who experience gender dysphoria, the feeling of discomfort that comes from one's gender not matching their biological sex. For some trans people, it is hard to engage in physical intimacy, among other forms of intimacy, due to gender dysphoria. Being able to choose an avatar, actor, or even porn star that aligns with your gender could help alleviate those symptoms and allow for less stress and anxiety during physical or emotional intimacy. For example, when someone posted on Reddit asking for VR experiences that might help alleviate gender dysphoria, people replied recommending VR Chat, an online virtual world platform that allows users to create their own 3D avatars and interact with each other. This means that people who are trans, or even questioning their gender identity, have the opportunity to see themselves in a different body and interact with others in this way. While physically transitioning can be a long and expensive process for many, virtual reality allows for an instant transition. This is just one example of how virtual reality can help trans people make connections while having their preferred appearance. Additionally, this can be helpful for trans people exploring physical intimacy by being able to use an avatar or actor of their preferred gender in porn. With embodiment, people are able to feel like they actually have the appearance of the body they're inhabiting in virtual reality. Overall, I don't think that intimacy in virtual reality is a true replacement for the real thing, but when used wisely, it can be a great tool for people to connect with others and act as a new form of intimacy. However, selling people this intimacy feels dystopian, especially considering how powerful VR can be in creating empathy and allowing for embodiment, and the mental health impacts of forming parasocial relationships in VR definitely needs more research. As with all new technology, it raises ethical concerns. But it has its precedence in 1894, so I don't think it's going away anytime soon.